The Pirates could have a top 10 bullpen unit in all of baseball in 2024, but what must happen for the bullpen as a whole to achieve that goal, and why do they have the pieces to make it happen?
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. My name is Ethan Smith. You can follow me right there on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates, where I bring you all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. It is Thursday, February 8th, and you know what that means. The player preview series just keeps on rolling. On Monday, we talked about Quinn Priester, Roansy Contreras, and Luis Ortiz. On Tuesday, we talked about Carmen Majewski, Paul Skeens, Jared Jones, and Anthony Solometto. On yesterday's show, we talked about Colin Holderman, Aroldis, Chapman, and David Bednar potentially being MLB's best relief trio. But who stands out among the rest in the bullpen for the Pittsburgh Pirates? I think it's very important to talk about that as who stands out among the rest. And after yesterday's show, obviously we discussed the 7-8-9 punch of Holderman, Chapman, and Bednar. Now we move on to discussing the rest of the bullpen today and why that unit can be, as a whole, a top 10 unit in baseball. Now, MLB.com currently has their Pirates depth chart for bullpen, or their bullpen relief arms, listed as David Bednar, Colin Holderman, Aroldis Chapman, Jose Hernandez, Colin Selby, Kyle Nicholas, Carmen Majewski, Hunter Stratton, and Ryan Borucki. Now, obviously, Dauri Moreta is going to take one of those spots. I see no reason why he won't. And then, obviously, you see Hunter Stratton is in there. You see Colin Selby in there and Kyle Nicholas. Those guys kind of going to be fighting, I think, for that last spot in the bullpen. And we've spoken about three of those players already. We've spoken about Bednar. We've spoken about Holderman. We've spoken about why the Chapman acquisition is so big for this bullpen. But almost equally as important, though, folks, are the names that we've mentioned on this show before and the names in the bullpen that can make this a top unit. And this list, by the way, that I just mentioned, those players does not include Wiley Peralta, NRI's Ben Heller and Ryder Ryan, Arizona Fall League participants Tyler Samaniego, Nick Domkowski, JC Flowers, and Cameron Junker. You could see those guys potentially contribute if needed. And when you look at this bullpen, which posted pretty middle of the pack numbers last year, obviously there were some inflations from small stints like Kyle Nicholas and Colin Selby that were sprinkled in there to kind of inflate things. But there hasn't really been much change from the bullpen from last year to this year, outside of the fact that they added Aroldis Chapman, who over the past decade has been one of the best relief pitchers in all of baseball. And when you look at this unit last year, it had a 4.27 ERA, a 1.33 whip, a 638 strikeouts, and 259 walks. So those numbers were not all among league best, obviously, but the strikeout total ranked 8th in baseball and 2nd in the NL Central, only behind the Chicago Cubs, who were 7th. And as I already mentioned as well, outside of the Chapman acquisition, not much has really changed as far as the unit is concerned, seen by the list that I gave you earlier. But as mentioned on yesterday's show, Chapman immediately, right when that signing happened, made this a better unit, which to me is going to create a domino effect of the other bullpen options with upside also improving, because their roles are not going to be as big, but they're still going to be vital roles. Now, when you're looking at all of the relievers that I've mentioned and all of the guys that you could talk about in this bullpen, outside of that top three, I really think the guy with the biggest upside and the name that stands out is Carmen Majewski. It has to be Carmen Majewski when you're starting to talk about these complementary roles in the bullpen. And you looked at what he did last year, and he sprung onto the scene and performed very well. 35 games, 36 innings pitched, 2.25 ERA, 34 strikeouts, and a 1.28 whip. Oh, yeah. And by the way, Majewski did all that at the age of 24, and he'll be 25 in just a few weeks. So happy early birthday, Carmen Majewski. And you could look at him arguably, and it's really not that hard of an argument, as the Pirates' best young relief arm at the current moment. Now, about equally as impressive was his month of September, and I really enjoyed that month of September that I'm going to talk about here in a minute did happen for him because, yeah, he pitched a ton in his first year. I mean, again, I mentioned 36 innings pitched, 12 and a third of those came in the month of September and 14 appearances. He had a 2.19 ERA and a 1.3 whip in that span, numbers he nearly replicated over the whole season. So you look at that and you say, okay, this kid is starting to gain a little bit of traction. And of the group, I think he also offers the most upside as a high leverage option in the bullpen for this team in 2024, something we saw Dauri Moreta do a ton last year. But when Majewski was coming into games late in games last year, folks, in the seventh inning or later last season, Carmen Majewski had a 2.27 ERA, 30 strikeouts, and a 1.45 whip. The whip you would like to see come down, but he was basically showcasing that he could be trusted in crucial game spots in those high leverage situations that every bullpen is truly looking for. He also had a 1.13 whip on the season when runners were in scoring position, surrendering only 7 hits in those scenarios over 10 and 2/3 innings pitched. So again, Carmen Majewski, I think when you are talking about these complementary pieces in the bullpen, I do think he's the guy that when you see him come into the game, especially if he can come back even with a fraction of the production that he had last year, I think when you see him come into the game before they hand it off to that 7-8-9 of Holderman, Chapman, and Bednar, you could trust that Carmen Majewski is either going to keep the game close or maintain a lead relatively easily, just because we've already seen him do it before. And that's something you're going to hear me talk about a lot with this bullpen when I'm talking about it being a potentially top 10 unit, because we've seen these guys all do this before already. So it's not really any surprise to say, oh, yeah, we could see them do it again. Now, obviously, regression is going to be a big part of this. There are going to be guys that may or may not perform up to the same caliber that they performed in 2023, and that's just fine. But when you also look at the amount of options that this team has in the bullpen right now, really one or two of those guys can afford to not have the greatest season, because then you have 5 or even maybe 6 guys that you could trust at any given time. And Carmen Majewski right now of the complimentary group has the most trust to me because, one, again, he has the most upside, and I expect him to separate from the pack in quickly. I think he'll become the primary 6th inning option to hand off to a lethal trio in the back end. I think he'll end up being a guy that early on, if a starter only pitches 4 or 5 innings, he's the guy that comes in and really keeps the game close or doesn't let things really derail. And I think Carmen Majewski is only going to continue to get better. Now, his stats may not get better, but that doesn't mean he isn't getting better. I think a lot of people do get lost in the fact that stats can really be the be all end all for some people. And it's just, to me, like sometimes Majewski could have a 2.60 ERA this year, but you might see the strikeout number come up. You might see his strikeout to walk ratio go down. You might see the whip go down, even though his ERA goes up. And of course, on StatCast, he was very good last year as well. So for Majewski, although he didn't qualify for a lot of those advanced metrics, I think most of you will expect that Majewski, especially in spring, I think he's going to show out a little bit. And I think he'll end up being that primary 6th inning option as far as things are concerned. But for an elite bullpen, contributions have to be made by everyone. So who else can make a positive impact in this bullpen? And is there a group of 3 guys that could be the key to the Pirates bullpen really reaching that ceiling of being a top 10 unit? We'll talk about that in just a moment. But before we do that, we're going to talk about game time. Folks, download the GameTime app today and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off, because you shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. GameTime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Obviously, Last minute tickets are great. Flash deals are great. Zone deals are great. Easy to find and buy tickets for any kind of event in your area, and you get views from all the seats in the venue. And GameTime is also the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase because you get all-in prices that show your total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out. And all you have to do is buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. And the GameTime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. So download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off, and download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And folks, Locked On has also launched the first ever National Sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now you can also find it on Amazon Fire TV. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. So find the Locked On Sports Today channel now on Amazon Fire TV and YouTube. Now, when we're discussing the Pittsburgh Pirates bullpen, we've already discussed 4 names over the past 4 segments of this show going back to yesterday's show. But there's 3 guys that I want to bring up specifically here that I think could really be the key to this Pirates team having a top 10 unit as far as the bullpen is concerned in all of baseball. Again, to have an elite bullpen, contributions and good ones must be made by everyone involved. That is just something that you're going to have to see. Yes, you're going to have those stints where you have injuries and you have guys like Kyle Nicholas last year and Colin Selby who might have those blow-up innings or blow-up starts and not really get all that many opportunities, and that can inflate your numbers. But also, I want to step away from the numbers a little bit until later, because there's certain numbers that speak highly of this. There's certain numbers to me that are just, there's too many different factors that play into them. Now, the Pirates have options to do what I just said, to get contributions and good ones from a lot of people. Some that we've already seen perform at this level, and I want to start with Dauri Moreta. Dauri Moreta, of course, was acquired via the Kevin Newman trade with Cincinnati and quickly became a fan favorite in Pittsburgh as, of course, Dauri Money Moreta. And he was a StatCast stuffer last year, folks. I really hadn't looked at it all that much. I've been getting into advanced analytics a lot with baseball, a lot more lately, as you guys have been telling on the show. And Moreta ranked in the 90th percentile or higher last season among all pitchers in expected ERA, expected batting average, whiff rate, and strikeout rate. I was like, whoa, I did not expect that. And he did all that while posting a 3.72 ERA over 58 innings while striking out 76 with an impressive 1.09 whip. So, you would say, yeah, those are all phenomenal numbers. And it was a breakout of sorts for Moreta. I mean, in Cincinnati, he struggled the year prior, and he became especially popular in those high leverage spots. That's really where we were starting to see Moreta come into his own a little bit in Pittsburgh, was in those high leverage spots, and those spots where runners were in scoring position and 2-out situations. And in those 2-out situations last year, folks, Moreta pitched 20.2 innings, striking out 33 and having a whip at 0.87. Yeah. He also had a 1.10 ERA over 16 and a third innings pitched in the 6th inning, which also saw his highest inning strikeout total of 19. So when it came to Moreta last year, there were those moments where he kind of had issues, but 9 times out of 10 last year, he was very good in these high leverage spots. And you would like to see Moreta elicit just a little more chase rate and miss barrels a little more often. But if he can even have a fraction of that production that he had last year, you immediately, and this is immediately, I think, have 2 high leverage relief options at your disposal in Carmen Majewski and Dauri Moreta. Folks, that is now 5 pitchers that I've named that I think I can fully trust in this bullpen going into 2024. Then hey, let's keep going because I think the positivity just keeps on rolling when it comes to the bullpen. There's Ryan Borucki, who had one of the best campaigns of his career last year. In 40 and a third innings, he became a strong left-handed option for this team. He struck out 33 and posted a 2.45 ERA in those 40 and a third innings. He didn't qualify for a lot of advanced stuff, but he also ranked highly among MLB relievers in hard hit rate, barrel rate, walk rate, chase rate, and expected ERA. I mean, you're talking about this guy potentially being your sixth best reliever, in my opinion. And he also saw the second highest strikeout rate of his career in 2023 with a 21.7% rate while posting his easily career best 2.6 walk rate. Borucki was very good last year. And he kind of came out of nowhere, too, because, I mean, really the left-handed option was supposed to be Jarlin Garcia, who we never got to see in a Pirates uniform, sadly. And then Jose Hernandez, who we'll talk about in a minute. Was an option for the most of the time, but Borucki was kind of the guy as the left-handed option late in the year. Now, obviously, Aroldis Chapman is going to be your top left-handed option, but based off of where you want him to be, you're going to want him to be used late in games. I don't think you're going to want to use Chapman in the fifth or the sixth inning unless it's like a playoff scenario type game. But so having another strong left-handed option is never a bad thing. I don't think it really is. And Borucki showed he can come in earlier and make an impact all the same. I mean, realistically. For instance, in the fifth inning, Borucki posted a 2.35 ERA in 11 games while posting a .91 whip. So much like Moretta, Borucki, based on matchups, has truly proven that he could be a pretty viable early game option if a starter has a good or a bad day. And also, if matchups dictate and there's lefties in the sixth inning, do you trust Borucki to go out there in the sixth inning? Based off of what he showed me last year, I do. So we're now, folks, at 6 pitchers that I fully trust in this bullpen on paper right now. Then enter Jose Hernandez, the Pirates' Rule 5 selection, who stepped again into a bigger role last year after the injury to Jarlin Garcia. And he's a guy that showed flashes. He didn't do anything absolutely crazy, but he had a pretty decent season for his first campaign. He posted a 4.97 ERA over 50 and 2/3 innings. He struck out 62 in that span. It's not bad for a rookie campaign, especially a rookie campaign where he wasn't truly expected to have that kind of role until the Jarlin Garcia injury happened, and then other injuries in the bullpen happened as well. He kind of just got sprung into it, and you could tell at times that he was a little overwhelmed with it, which is fine. But he's a young option in this bullpen, still has time to grow. And with all these names that I've already mentioned, Bednar, Holderman, Chapman, Majewski, Moretta, Borucki, you're looking at a kid now in Jose Hernandez that suddenly does not have as much pressure on him to be a top performer anymore, which is very good for him, I think. I don't even know if he'll get to 50 innings this year. He might. It's something that you might see, but he's the 7th, maybe 8th option in this bullpen. And that's not a bad thing at all to say a guy that had a 4.97 ERA over 50 innings last year is your 7th or 8th option in the bullpen, folks. And a lot of pressure comes off of him now being pretty much the 3rd left-handed pitching bullpen option. And he did well last year for all intents and purposes. I mean, he struck out 27.8% of the batters he faced. That was his strikeout rate. You would like to see the 9.9% walk rate come down. But if he can manage somehow in a smaller sample size to keep that strikeout rate around what it was and bring down that walk rate and maybe even bring down the ERA as your 7th best option in the bullpen, folks, that is insane. So I'm hoping now that through these first 2 segments, I've kind of created a roadmap, that I've kind of created this thing where you guys are starting to hear all these names. Yes, we saw every single one of these guys except Aroldis Chapman pitch in a Pirates uniform last year and do it relatively well. So now that you enter Aroldis Chapman into this mix and do all of this, why is it important that I keep saying these names? Why is it important that I went out of my way to explain Jose Hernandez's stats and the fact that he could be your 7th or 8th option? Not even including other potential contributors. So how can the Pirates put this all together to make this bullpen a top 10 unit? I'm going to get into that in just a moment, but before we do, we're going to talk about FanDuel. Folks, FanDuel Sportsbook is here for you this Super Bowl Sunday at FanDuel.com/lockedon. And happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because if you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. Again, hit the parlay. 49ers Chiefs over, Travis Kelce anytime touchdown, Christian McCaffrey anytime touchdown. I think that's going to be your stuff, and enjoy some Buffalo wings while you're at it. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a W or 2 or even 3. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. New customers can join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon, and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and an official sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network. So now, welcome to the third and final segment of today's episode of Locked On Pirates. Now that we've discussed pretty much the entire bullpen, now I think it's interesting to kind of project a little bit about what the likeliest setup we see from Derek Shelton is as far as how he's going to use these relievers. Now, when you go to innings 5 through 6, now when I'm doing this, I am also going to preface when I'm doing this that I'm doing this in terms of taking every scenario into account. Now, obviously, there's going to be rest involved in this. There's going to be a lot of things involved in this. But in innings 5 through 6, I have Dauri Moreta, Ryan Borucki, Jose Hernandez, Colin Holderman, Carmen Majewski, and the rest that are available, like Kyle Nicholas or Colin Selby. Those are the options that I'm most comfortable with seeing in innings 5 through 6. So now when we move to the 7th inning down, this is where I think that you're going to start pinching it a little bit more. Because in the 7th inning, I have Dauri Moreta, Carmen Majewski, so my two high leverage guys that I think I can trust late in games. Colin Holderman, who I think will pitch the most of his time in the 7th inning, and Aroldis Chapman, who could also pitch the 7th inning, dictating matchups. You then go to the 8th inning. I think you could still include Majewski. Now, Moreta, I would be hesitant to include that late because you do have Holderman and Chapman, who are my other 8th inning guys. And then the 9th inning is David Bednar. But if needed, I think you could trust Aroldis Chapman or Colin Holderman to get it done in the 9th inning. Now, obviously that list doesn't include rest, injury, and many other factors, but it paints you, the listener, a picture of when and where you'll see these guys. And I think that's important for me not to just be naming these guys off and saying, oh yeah, well, these are the 7 options you have. But I wanted to paint a picture as to where you can see these guys and why the setup of how it's going to move along games is going to be such a good thing. Now, Moreta, Borucki, Hernandez, and I'd even throw Hunter Stratton, Colin Selby, and Kyle Nicholas into this, are your early tone setters. You would prefer it to be Moreta, Borucki, and Hernandez, and maybe even Holderman if you want to, or Majewski, taking over and not allowing the game to get out of reach or maintaining a lead. Now, I'd like to think, if it came to it, that I could trust Moreta in the 7th, maybe even the 8th, as I kind of showed you, because he's shown me he can. But I'd rather Majewski be cemented in that 6, 7, and 8 inning role in high leverage situations, just because 1, I think he has the higher upside, and 2, I trust him just a little bit more than Dauri Moreta right now, which isn't a bad thing at all. Holderman will mostly pitch the 7th, but can shift between 7 through 9, which I think is the same deal with Aroldis Chapman, just more in the 8th. And then Bednar will always be the closer if he can go. We know that. But matchups may see him in the 8th from time to time. Now, if you've listened this long, this is where this all comes to fruition now. And this is where all these stats that you're going to hear and everything I'm about to say from this point forward to end the show is going to be why the Pittsburgh Pirates are going to have a top 10 bullpen in baseball in 2024. I'm even going to probably clip this and post it on Twitter so that I can show everybody that this is a thing. That group that I've named has real talent. I'm going to name them again. David Bednar, Aroldis Chapman, Colin Holderman, Carmen Majewski, Dauri Moreta, Jose Hernandez, Ryan Borucki. That's 7 relievers. Combined between those 7 relievers last year, folks, they combined to have a 3.19 ERA last year. That is a whole point ERA below the 4.27 mark that the Pirates bullpen had last season. Folks, 3.19 combined between 7 relievers is absolutely nuts. And the 7 players mentioned are your ideal bullpen. You're going to have contributions throughout the season and likely one other person in the bullpen there, like Stratton, like Nicholas, like Selby, being there for emergency support. But if those 7 manage to stay relatively healthy, folks, you have 7 pitchers that you can go back and look at that have stats to back up to say that they can be trusted. For context on that ERA, by the way, for context on how good 7 relievers combining for a 3.19 ERA last year was, the Yankees bullpen led all of baseball in ERA from their bullpen last year at 3.34. That is a 15-point ERA difference. Like, just reading this and telling it to you is even flabbergasting me. Because this bullpen ceiling, especially on paper, is there. They have 2 high leverage options, at least, in Moretta and Majewski. They have 2 quality setup pitchers in Colin Holderman, who was in the top 10 in holds last year, and Aroldis Chapman, who doesn't seem like he's losing a step with age. They have a top 5 closer in the National League and arguably in baseball in David Bednar. That's without mentioning Ryan Borucki, Jose Hernandez, Hunter Stratton, Colin Selby, Kyle Nicholas. And more importantly, those guys that I was just mentioning are the options behind these guys if things get shaky. And I mentioned the NRIs earlier and some of the Arizona Fall League participants, but even the likes of Luis Ortiz could be impactful if he doesn't pan out as a starter. They have so many options. And what does that mean? I keep bringing up injuries. I bring up maybe one of these guys doesn't perform as well as we're accustomed to. But folks, when you have 7, maybe even 8 options in the bullpen that you can go into a game and trust to use, even if one of them isn't having the best season, you have 7. Even if 2 of them aren't having the best season, you have 6. The Pirates bullpen has a ceiling that is massive. This is a unit that is going to shorten games for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Now, to expect all these relievers to have similar or better seasons to their 2023 ones is crazy. But again, if 5 of the 7 can be adequate options, which you already know you're going to have at least 2 in Chapman and Bednar, and Holderman and Majewski are basically given, so you have 4. You just need one of the other 3 to be an adequate option, and you have 5 options in the bullpen that you could trust every single day. And if health dictates on paper, there is no doubt in my mind that this is a top unit in all of baseball. And regression can be expected for sure. That's fine. But even if that 3.19 ERA combined rises slightly, you heard what led baseball last year at 3.34. It would still likely be among baseball's best marks, and the Pirates could use that as part of their aspirations to contend this year. The bullpen is likely their strongest position group, and that is not a bad thing at all because it's going to have a domino effect across the entire roster. This is a top 10 unit, folks. It just is. I really think it is. And folks, I hope you agree. If you want to share your thoughts in the comments on today's episode, please do. And also thank you for always tuning into the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. My name is Ethan Smith. You can follow me on Twitter right there at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. You can also find this podcast on Spotify, Odyssey, Google Play, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. Tomorrow, we're talking all about Henry Davis as the 2024 Player Preview Series continues. But until then, folks, I will see you on the flip side.